Number 13. First, if you could go over, you talked to us a little bit earlier about legislative intent and what to keep in mind.
Just as far as when you're interpreting statutes in the courts and stuff, the intent of one legislator does not extend to the entire legislature. And so when you're interpreting a statute, and I forget why I said it, but anyway, the clear language of the statute controls even over the intent of the proponent of that legislation. And so I just wanted to make that clear. Is that excellent? And that's ANLV Taxi Cab is the name of the case.
Mr. Claborn, I believe everybody's got a copy of the letter. It was laying here on our counter this morning.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for coming.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chair. My name is Jerry Claborn, of course. It gives me great pleasure to appear in front of you folks today. I heard what the gentleman said about the intent. Well, I strongly disagree with him. I'm going to read this letter to you for the simple fact that I want to make sure I don't make any mistakes about the intent of the bill that I put together, that I wrote, and that I passed through the legislation back in 2001. It's been modified, and I can understand maybe where he's coming from a little bit. But anytime you pass a bill or anything, the proponent of the bill, you have to have an intent. Just like the bill that you just passed. This gentleman right here, he asked for the intent of the bill, and the gentleman that made the motion gave it to him. Everybody on the board voted for it. They all knew the intent. So what I'm trying to clarify here today is the intent of this bill that I wrote back in 2001 that was passed. I don't plan on getting any big arguments with anybody over this bill, but I do want to clarify some stuff that I've got a few calls that about the 2011 fiscal year for funding's coming out, and so that's the reason I wrote this letter. And it goes something like this. As chairman of Natural Resources Committee, during the 2001 legislation session, I wrote, and my committee passed, AB 291, an act relating to game tags imposing an additional fee for processing an application for big game tag for the sport of programs to control predators and to protect wildlife habitat and providing the matters properly related hereto. The sole purpose of this bill was to bring back our mule deer by implementing extensive predator control on mountain lions, coyotes. No part of the revenue of this bill was to be used by NDOW for any type of salaries, wages, travel, vehicle use, mileage, or any other fixed costs such as computers or uniforms. In addition, the intent was to have wildlife commissioners approve all programs utilized and utilizing these fees as stated in NRS 502-253, number 3, any program developed of wildlife management and actively or research conducted to this section must be developed or conducted under the guidance of the Commission pursuant to subsection 2 of NRS 501-181. Let me be perfectly clear. The sole intent on this bill was to put on the on-ground predator projects for the enhancement of our deer because of our declining numbers. I hope this clarifies my intentions for the use of the funds. Now, I'm here today to ask or answer any questions that you might want to ask me about the intent of this legislation bill.
Any questions? Mr. McBeth and then Mr. Lamp.
Thank you, Chairman. Mr. Claborn?
Yes, sir.
As an attorney, I fully understand the process of passing legislation, and so what I did is I basically got, through the Legislative Counsel Bureau, the legislative history for AB 291. And I want to quote to you from, and these are the minutes of the Assembly Committee on Ways and Means, and the date of this is April 25th, 2001. Chairman Arbery asked how the amount of $3 had been determined. Mr. Claborn answered he had been trying to generate enough money to start a program. To start a program, it was necessary to have enough money to hire people, buy vehicles, and set up the program. That seems diametrically opposed to what you've just stated in your letter. I also want to state that Gene Weller, who was the Deputy Administrator, Division of Wildlife at the time, testified. Mr. Weller said that the bill would supplement the current existing predator program at approximately $140,000 a year, adding nearly $300,000 to the program. So there was already a program in place, and I'm sure that they were administering a program with the fully loaded administrative costs that are associated with that in fixed assets. In addition, there was an additional Assembly Committee on National Resources, so this would be your committee, and the date of that hearing was March 28, 2001, and in that, Mr. Bradley, who I believe was the chairman of the commission, the Wildlife Commission at the time, these are some of his statements. Mr. Bradley emphasized the need to fund educational programs and asked that a portion of funds support Operation Wild program. Continuing, Mr. Bradley replied that research into successful techniques for predator management and educating the public would be additions. Assemblyman Carpenter asked if the funds would support existing programs and would not detract from them. Terry Crawford, Nevada Division of Wildlife, replied existing programs would be enhanced. So when I look at the legislative history, it seems to be very, very different than what you're saying in your letter.
I can explain that.
Okay.
Nothing ever took place, what you're talking about. How this thing works, we all know NDOW does not take out any predators. We all know that. What they do, they have wildlife services do their killing of predators for them. So why would they need uniforms or anything else when all they do, the whole program was supposed to be for the Agriculture Department to set this up. I don't know if that ever happened. But all the animals and the predators that have been taken out, it goes like this. The NDOW was supposed to do the research. If too many mountain lions, too many coyotes, were taking too many, the doe-fawn ratio, the NDOW would give a buck slip to Wildlife Services and say in Area 19 or Area 20, you're going to have to take out some predators, be it 10 cats, 20 coyotes. Here's a buck slip. They hired a couple more hunters and put them on their payroll. They're the ones that did the killing. They're the ones that took out the predators. NDOW didn't do anything. They just did the survey. And what you're talking about there, all that was supposed to take place over the years, but nothing ever took place over the years. Now that the funding got low and the situation is like nobody has any money, then they start peeling money off NDOW on this predator control money that we generated. We did everything in our power to protect some of the trappers that we had last legislation, and we lost a couple of them or whatever, but this thing has never worked like that was supposed to be back in 2001 to get the bill passed. That's the intent. We're talking about what NDOW was supposed to do, but they didn't do nothing. They did not do it.
One follow-up question. The legislation was passed in 2001. It's now September 24th, 2010. Can you explain why it's taken 9 years for you to come before this commission and tell us that what the intent of the legislation was when we've had this program in place, since 2003, I believe, or maybe even since 2001. I'm not sure exactly when it started. I'm a little confused on the start date, but explain sure. To me why now that you're coming, before the commission.
I can answer that real easy.
Okay.
I'm term limited out. I've been Natural Resource and Agriculture and Mining Chairman for the last 3 sessions. If I wasn't term limited out, I wouldn't be here today. I would pass another bill, and we would get the real intent and make sure that we get the ratio down and start taking out some of these predators. Every hunter in this whole state knows that we're getting devoured by predators. I don't understand, never have understand NDOW's position on this. Wildlife Services, they've been great. I have no bad word for Wildlife Services whatsoever. But you know, it takes money, and they won't do anything unless they get money. That's what the money was for. Can anybody tell me in this building, did agriculture set up any programs? Look at the bill. Agriculture would set up the programs and give the money through NDOW to go out, give it to Wildlife Services, and take the predators out. And some of that stuff that you read is probably so, but you forgot to read some that I have here. When I introduced the bill for the very first time, I'm going to leave that as an exhibit. I can give it to Mr. Raines, whoever wants it. And that's the intent of the bill. It's the first time that Bill Bradley knew anything about this bill. He was introduced by Larry Johnson. Everybody knows Larry Johnson. Every one of those guys in here was for the bill, just the way the intent of it was to protect the mule deer. How this came about was to protect the mule deer. Once you protect the mule deer by taking out coyotes, cats, then you save everything. You protect antelope, you protect elk. It has a trickle-down theory of, just like, it's like Wildlife Services. The only thing they handle is if they don't get any buck slip from NDOW is private, personal. They don't handle any wildlife. They only handle what is private. Like if your horses or whatever in your barn and they call them or whatever, but nobody that does anything to protect our wildlife with this money. There's a very few programs and whatever that's been over the period of time, but this money was the intent to bring back the mule deer, and that was what the bill was put together for. And I know some of you sitting on there know the whole intent of it. Now, you can ask me any questions you want, but I wrote the bill, I passed the bill, and if you would like to bring all the other ones, the way this thing passed was 41 to nothing in the Assembly, 21 to nothing in the Senate. And everybody knew the intent of the bill, to bring back the mule deer. That's all in a nutshell.
All right. We kind of
Just want to follow up with one final statement. I think what you've stated is probably the most, what you've last stated is probably the most important thing, is that it was passed 42 to nothing in the Assembly. It was passed, whatever the number is, in the Senate, and it was signed by a governor. That's the process to pass a law, and the point that is made by the DAG is very poignant, very clear, that one Assemblyman is just part of one spoke in the wheel, so to speak.
Okay, thank you. All right, and then we'll go.
Let me finish that. Okay, since you asked me the question, probably so. But here's how a bill works. First you get an idea and you put it together. It's called a BDR. Once you introduce it on the floor in the State Assembly, it goes back and comes back out as a bill. This happened to be AB 291. Now, once I got that bill in my hand, I went to my constituents, my guys we work with, whatever, and they signed this on with me. And I told them the intent of the bill. They say, well, what's the intent of that, Jerry? We don't just go up there and sign bills like that. It kind of upsets me when a state official says, well, not the intent of the bill. My God, man, I know what the intent is. when you grow a lemon tree, you intend to get lemons, not apples, right? What is this? I do know the intent of this bill, and everybody that signed on with me knew the intent. I'll be happy to answer some more questions.
Can I clarify?
Go ahead.
You may have misunderstood what I said. I didn't say that that was not the intent of the bill. What I said is the statements made by you can't contradict the plain language of the bill. I don't know that they do. I'm just saying that if the plain language of the bill says one thing, then
what?
Then that's how it has to be applied.
Are you saying somebody's saying something else?
No, I'm not. I'm just giving the law
You're
here.
implicating that.
I don't think I am.
That upsets me.
This is just our Deputy Attorney General. He just interprets the law for us, and that's what we know. Okay, we go with Mr. Capurro, followed by Mr. Lamp.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Having taken part in the legislative process for almost 41 years now, I can tell you this, that in intent, clearly the DAG is correct. The actual written language in the bill, as it is signed by the governor, is the law. Now, if there is a question about what there might be in that bill or an interpretation of provisions of it, then they go to the intent as established through the hearing process, going clear back to the introduction of the bill. So I don't think there's any question with regard to AB 291 of that session that what the intent was. The intent was very clear. It was to provide money for predator management and control. That's the central issue of the bill. Whether or not it could be used for issues such as education, that was one person's proposal set forth in a committee meeting, and whether or not he was on the board of wildlife commissioners or not, that was his own personal belief that part of that money should be used for education. I don't believe that provision actually ended up in the bill itself. The fact of the matter is that the money has been used for predator control. We have several projects. I sit on that committee with chairman is the chairman of that committee, and we allocate money to different areas for predator control. You're right, the money has slowed down some because of the economy and other things. So it becomes probably more of an issue because, like with everything else, we don't have enough money to do everything we want to do. But there is no question that the money was to be used for predator control. I don't think there's any question that that's what we've been using it for. And that was the intent of the legislation at the beginning. Thank you.
All right, we got Mr. Lent, followed by Mr. Vogler.
Mr. Claborn?
Yes, sir.
I got a couple of questions here. Looking at the FY 2010, where some of these funds have been used, and I'm going to ask you a question, but administrative overhead, $56,100, salaries, game bureau chief, $5,000, staff biologist, $62,000, field biologist, $9,700, administrative assistants, $856, for a total of $78,293. They've got a predator conference out of this, $1,200, travel, $840, mileage, $2,600, uniforms, $200, and they also bought computers with this money, and then the computers are not in they were moved over to wildlife service or to biodiversity or something originally. Was this your intent of the use of the funds on this bill?
Absolutely not. As a matter of fact, that was what I assumed that you board here do. You are the Board of Commissioners. You make those decisions, not I. I wasn't privileged to that. You folks were. I'm out of the equation here. I'm only down here for one reason, is I got a few calls about this, and you know what? It's out of my hands anymore. Like I'm term limited out. I'm just one individual up here speaking because I'm a little upset about the whole situation. Our deer herds have not come back. They're getting worse and worse because we are not spending that money. That bill was passed in 2001. There's been $1 million, over $1 million that went through there. And I understand they've had some success with their predators control. But you know what? Back in 2005, I went to the governor and I had a survey. The hunters was 97%. They was willing to raise that $3 fee, tag fee for predator fund, up to $5, even to $8. But the governor would not let me do it because he called it a tax. And the next, 2006, the next governor called it a fee. I said, well, you guys can't make up your mind. The last one said it was a tax. You say it's a fee. What's the difference between a tax and a fee? Needless to say, they would not let me raise that, although the sportsmen are all willing to do that. I had it on you guys are aware of it, I had it on my website, and I had it there for 4 or 5 years. And I took all of those, and you couldn't vote twice on this thing. You could only vote once. That cost quite a bit of dollars to get that set up. But it was 97% of the people that emailed me on this survey, they was all willing to do that. But of course, the governors wouldn't do it. So therefore, I tried to generate more money. That's all I've ever done, is try to give wildlife, Nevada Endow, as much money, and as much support as they ever had. Before I got there, they never had anything. They never had any money coming in for predator control. They never had nothing. The bills that myself, John Carpenter, Pete Goachia, and we're the ones that is trying to save these deer herds. It's not Endow, for crying out loud. It's the people like us, our sons and our daughters hunting and fishing. We try to provide the money so that they will go out there and do their jobs. But guess what? Here it is, 2010. What's the deer count? We have more deer than we had 2001? I don't think so. Why not? Habitat, fires, we had those for the last, I've been here since 1957. We've had fires, we've had droughts, we've had them all. What's the next excuse? Come on, man, you're going to have to do something. These surveys, the whole thing we put this together for was we are sick and tired of taking all these surveys. It doesn't take a genius to know if you have your herd is getting ate up by wolves, like he was talking about in Idaho and Montana. We all know what's killing our elk up there. Those wolves are taking out and decimating our animals in Montana. And what are they doing about it? They're arguing, is he a predator or is he something else? In the meantime, he's devouring all of our lives, all of our wildlife. Come on, man, wake up. Holy mackerel. It doesn't take a scientist to know if you got 10,000 coyotes, you're trying to bring back our sage hen, and you have 10,000 coyotes out there eating eggs, how the hell are you going to have any chicks? You need some help from Nevada Department of Wildlife, or not Endow, the regular Nevada Wildlife, or what the hell ever they're called, the feds, the one gentleman who was just up here talking today. Where's the help from them? Where's the money? We just give millions and millions to Egypt and everywhere else. Where's the money here for us? Let's file for some of those money. Pittman Robbins and Johnson and Dingles, that is not enough money to keep us above board. Let's get creative. You know, I'm only a servant to the state for 12 years there, but I spent my entire time up there. My number one goal was, of course, education. But you know what? I'm wrapped up in wildlife just like a cocoon. And you know, I hate to see what's happening. Everybody knows what's going to happen if we don't get off our butts quit fighting, just like Congress. They're up there fighting, nothing's being done. Nevada Endow, they're fighting, nothing's getting done. When are they going to stop? Anyway,
Okay.
I think I'm going to leave. I'm really upset about somebody from the state tells me I don't know the intent of something that I put together, put my heart in it. It pisses me off. Have a nice day, gentlemen. Thank you very much.
Thank
Mr.
you.
Claborn, would you please wait just a minute?
It was a friendly question, I believe.
Mr. Claborn, please stay for a minute. This is very important. For those of you who have never been in Assemblyman Claborn's office, I had Pete Goycochea once arranging a meeting with him, and I was going to straighten this gentleman out on hunting and wildlife issues and about predators, and I did not get a word in. I was pretty well told how it works, and I concur with everything he said. And he is a champion of wildlife and of sportsmen. His office is lined with hunting pictures of he and his family hunting. Not old, tired politicians, it's his family hunting. And that's why I feel it very important to be here, is for my children and my grandchildren and someday great-grandchildren to be able to do the same wonderful things I did. And you made a very interesting statement to me today, because I too, the metaphor about rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic, we've gone beyond that. We are now playing musical chairs on the deck of the Titanic. Every time the music stops for just a minute, there's one less seat for us to set down. And if we don't take these issues up, now you made a very statement that just really perked a lot of energy in me when you said that this, and it's pretty obvious to those of us who live out in the hinterland, that Endow is extremely uncomfortable with predator control. There does not seem to be any real connection with any enthusiasm. You said that this money was to be set up, and it was to be set up by Agriculture Department for this reason. Is that correct?
That was in the original bill. It's in the original bill. Look at it. Has anybody looked at AB 291, the original bill?
Then my
Probably
question,
not.
my question is, can we, as a group, as a commission, turn that money directly over to Wildlife Services? It's collected, I believe, by the Hunt Application Office, and bypass, and maybe that would be the best bang for our buck, metaphorically, is to just take it out of this and take it straight to Nevada Department of Agriculture.
Thank you, Mr. Volker. I'll tell you what, I really don't know. I'm not going to be up there to help you. I do know this. That was the intent, and it was never the intent to give all of this money to Endow. Endow was supposed to take some of that money, it's spelled out in the bill, to give it to Department of Agriculture. They make the programs. And you know what? They used to work Wildlife Services. They take the money. Endow says, go take out so many cats over in this canyon, take so many coyotes out of Caliente area, and then the program was set up through the agriculture. Endow, our Mr. Mayor here, he wasn't here when all this took place, but, and I'm not even going to mention the guy, he was supposed to give the money part of that money to agriculture. They would disperse it to Wildlife Services, and they would do whatever Endow wanted them to do, as long as they had a buck slip, and that's what your guys' job was. In the old days, they didn't believe in predator control. I think most of you do. You could see the ramification, what has happened since this bill has been passed. Cheatgrass has come in here in our country and almost destroyed us with fires and everything through Endow or through Nevada. That's our number one deal for fires and whatever. There's no nutrition in any of it or whatever, so we all know that. But the quag mussels, 10 years ago I told you guys, they're coming to Lake Mead, you better do something about it. Guess what? It's too late, they're already here, man. I mean, nobody acts. We go up there, we get elected, we form and we pass all these things, we have all these meetings, but nobody does squat. Anyway, Mr. Vogel, I remember our conversation, and you know what? I never did forsake you either. So thank you very much.
Thank you for coming. I much appreciate your efforts. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Claborn. All right. I had a question for the director here now. How can we implement what is clearly the intent of this bill? I mean, our last meeting, we talked about this, when the Wildlife Damage Management Committee came back with its recommendations. We basically we did not approve any NDOW expenditures. So how, and in that, there was a little bit of a balance left over. So what can we do? How can we all work together to get this back to the intent of the bill?
Well, you heard the intent of the bill. That's from the legislative record. Legislative record clearly identifies the ability of the department to utilize funds to pay for staff and for operating, and that's what.
Did you hear what the gentleman just said?
Well, I'm not going to argue with you, Mr. Rain. Is that what you're trying to engender as an argument?
I was just asking, and that's
I'm telling you what the intent of the legislation was, based on the legislative record. I took over a program that was ongoing. I might also add that we do have a contract with the Department of Agriculture for $400,000. So the intent of the bill in the regulation was for us to transfer money to the Department of Ag. Department of Ag then contracts with Wildlife Services for the projects that we approve. Okay, so that's what's occurring. Also, if you look back at while I've been director, the surplus that was available in that account is now almost completely utilized. So we haven't been sitting around with our finger in our ear wondering what to do about predator management. We've been doing it. And in fact, the budget was mismanaged this last year. I was asked to come up with $50,000 in addition to bail out Department of Agriculture and Wildlife Services, and we did it. So I take exception to the notion that we're not living up to the intent of the law, because I checked on that to make sure that we were living up to it. Number two, that we were following through and doing whatever we could do to transfer that money through that mechanism. Now, why this was established originally for our money, the sportsman's money, to go to agriculture, from agriculture to Wildlife Services, I don't understand. It should go directly from wildlife to Wildlife Services. But that's what the law is, that's what we do. Okay? The other thing, it's naive to think, Mr. Rain, that you could have a program and expend funds if you don't have any staff to do the work. We don't have people sitting around at their seats wondering what the heck they should do. How are you going to get how are you going to get contracts developed? How are you going to develop proposals? The work that's done on the ground, some of it's with our folks doing work. So it's pretty ubiquitous across all state agencies that if you have programs, you have staff that are dedicated to those programs, some lots, some small, be able to facilitate the program. What I'd be worried about is if we didn't have a staff person dedicated to work on predation management, we wouldn't have, you'd have, the surplus would be growing like crazy. So I guess I'm a little bit at a loss. I don't know what else we could do, quite frankly. So.
All right, Mr. Vogler.
When you talk to the folks out on the ground, when we continue to see the number of people working at an agency, whether they're justified or not, and the deer herds continue to go down, the sage hen are on the sensitive list, and there's only so much we can do. We can't control the weather. There's good nutrition years, there's bad nutrition years. Fires have become an integral part of Nevada's landscape. They always have been. Maybe the removal of more livestock has contributed to more light fuels being left around to make bigger and bigger fires. Another controversy we really can't handle. We could do something about some of the PJ encroachments in some of the counties, which would obviously facilitate more browses. But there is one thing we can do, and that is we have the capacity to eliminate a certain number of predators. Now, whether there's some model out there that says the more predators that you eliminate, the more larger litters they have, all of that kind of wafting philosophically, but as a hunter, with only so many days on his calendar, and the hunting opportunities are going away, and the kids are playing Nintendo, and they can get a disc from Cabela's and shoot trophies of every species without leaving the couch, it's a frustration from the hunters in this state in every direction. And the hunters are getting older and older and older because the kids are not doing it. And when this money, $3, is set aside, it seems like there's a biologist in every town, there's lots of employees, why couldn't the communication be as simple as, we had a foot of snow last night, we have a deer herd that stays on the East Shell Bench every year. Couldn't we just, while you're down there, couldn't you call Wildlife Services and say, hey, would you go down there and see if there's any coyotes hanging around? Or could we snare some lions when there's 3 of them drinking out of a guzzler? I mean, we could feed them the most expensive cat food on earth, cheaper than what the value of a desert bighorn sheep is to a hunter. And these are frustrations, and it's your job, I guess, to have to field all of these criticisms. You know, I mean, I'm sure that this is nothing new in anybody that's been in any public service, and it is extremely frustrating. And when I think of my $3 fee going for anything other than whacking them and stacking them, it just infuriates me, and it's very hard not to have that feeling. Thank you.
All right. And then let's get moving right on.
Yeah. Shouldn't a predator biologist and a duck biologist that be taken out of license funds, and license funds is the source of the wildlife account where you hire employees? And it seems like we're robbing. That should come out of the budget for the wildlife account. It seems like we're robbing. We're taking the duck stamp money and hiring a duck biologist. We're taking the application fee and using for other things. We're taking the habitat fee and the guzzler money to use other things. We're taking the predator fee for predator staff, and that should come out of the wildlife account, and the money from these special tags or special fees should be for on-the-ground project and not to send somebody to predator school. And that should come out of the wildlife account, coming out of license dollars, and the money from these special tags or the special fees should go for on-the-ground projects, I think. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Let's see if there's any public comment on the presentation and discussion of purpose of Assembly Bill 291. Anything on Mr. Claborn's comments?
For the record, Paul Dixon, it's a shame that Assemblyman Claborn left, because I would have liked to have him interact with the public. I know he got upset when...
He's not here, so let's go on.
Well, fine. I wanted to read to you from the exact language that was part of Assemblyman Claborn's intent, because the word intent is actually used in the paragraph from the March 26, 2001 Assembly Ways and Means Committee. Gene Weller, Deputy Administrator, Division of Wildlife, said the division supported the bill and worked closely with Mr. Claborn and his sponsors to develop the bill, as well as the Natural Resources Committee, to get the bill in a form where the division could use it most effectively. He said the division also worked closely with the Department of Agriculture. Mr. Weller said the division had realized there was a need for science-based, goal-oriented predator management in the state of Nevada and not indiscriminate killing of predators. He explained the program would illuminate the predator piece of the puzzle in the wildlife area. Predators are just part of the puzzle. However, there are a number of other factors that affect wildlife populations, most significantly weather. He said the intent of these proceeds from the $3 was to develop an extensive program with several elements. The elements would include control of predators, research to determine where predators needed to be controlled, and education of the sportsmen and public. I agree with Mr. Vogler that we need to go out and have effective predator programs. But part of the intent of this bill, which I just read you, was to basically go out and get the science-based information, which is NDOW, the biologists collect that, and number 2, educate the public. Because as you pointed out, Mr. Vogler, very clearly, there are a whole lot of things that we don't control, one of them being weather, the biggest, and fires maybe another one being the second biggest. Those things we don't control. Here, where we have control, we have to educate the public, and that's what I think NDOW's role in this is one, to give us the science-based information of where we have to go remove predators, and number two, helping us educate the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
And by the way, that was voted on the 28th, and Mr. Claborn revised the language of the bill to include public education specifically in AB 291, and it's in this administrative record.
You had George Corner had listed this. Did you want to say something on it?
George Corner, Nevada Outfitters and Guides Association, and we belabored this at numerous meetings. I'm going to keep it real short. Our position is we believe that Game Commission responsibility is to set broad policy, you know, all that language, and we object to the Game Commission trying to get involved. It sounds like, from what I've heard today, that you want to determine that all this money should be allocated to those projects that you feel are appropriate, and it should go right to wildlife services to kill predators. And that's not what we see as an appropriate way to go. Thank you.
Do we have anybody else? Okay. Okay, we have one over here, and then Mr. Moldy, and then we'll close public comment and move on.
Yeah, for the record, Walter Mandeville, Lyon County Board. I'd like to make a couple comments. I am somewhat familiar with some of the laws, and if you read the law book, it says the Department of Wildlife is responsible for the protection, preservation, and enhancement of all wildlife in the state of Nevada, not just deer and pronghorn, etc. So I know, and I've worked for the organization for over 30 years, that they concentrate and work on all the various issues on every wildlife population that they deal with. And so, and I am aware in that research that I did with the Rabies Control Commission, they actually did huge poison drops across the state during the 40s. Their intent was to kill every single predator. They were quite unsuccessful. And I'd also like to say that the mule deer herds are faced with many, many problems, and predators part of it. But with the many huge fires that we've had over the last 8 or 9 years, in addition to the human encroachment factor, I know in Reno, they pretty much wiped out some of the most important winter range that exists on that side of the Sierras, all the way down past Carson City. And I think Clark County has some of the same problems over here in the Spring Range. So you have to consider all the different parts of the problem. And I'm a little bit one-sided because I think the Department of Wildlife, they have some outstanding employees, and they're very dedicated, and I'll guarantee you they put in a hell of a lot more hours than they get paid for. So they're not just sitting back saying, well, we don't want to do anything with predators. That's not true. Every single project has that analysis goes into it. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you. We had Mr. Moldy, and then that was the end of, and that was the last of our public comment. All right.
Mr. Chairman, Don Moldy, Reno. It's kind of odd that I'm the only one that actually has some numbers today in the midst of this heated discussion, and I'll leave them here so you can pass them around among the commission if you like. These numbers include the number of coyotes killed in this state by Sportsmen and Wildlife Services since the fiscal year 2000, the number of mountain lions killed in that same period, and also the deer numbers, mule deer numbers as reflected in NDOW's annual census. All of these numbers are side by side, so if anybody's interested in looking at actual numbers, you can do that.
Mr. Moldy, I had a question. Where did your data come from?
From your own department and also from Wildlife Services websites. Wildlife Services posts annual tables of activity under APHIS/Wildlife Services. You can view their stuff. And so that's where the numbers come from. These are not my numbers. These are your numbers and Wildlife Services numbers.
Thank you. Just asking.
Yeah,
thank you.
I'm
Much
just
appreciate
telling
your
you.
help.
Thank you.
All right. Now let's close public hearing, and we'll move on with this item.